Welcome to the Find My New Life podcast. I'm Christopher Lapine, spiritual liberation author and speaker. This podcast brings you inspiration, hope, and answers for how to live a modern, God-centered spiritual life. It will help you have a more direct, deeper experience of God, find more happiness, and live your incredible God-given destiny. You can find all my podcasts, as well as videos, books, and more at findmynewlife.com. So, let's get started with today's show. Hi, welcome. This is the Find My New Life podcast, and this is actually a new series, My Journey to a Better Jesus. And this is a series where we explore people's personal experiences from what they were brought up with, what kind of held them back or gave them pain or dissatisfaction, and then their journey, their decisions, their insights, their experiences that brought them to a better understanding and experience to Jesus, which brought them to a better life. So my first guest I'm real privileged to have is Danny Zeigler. Danny has been on quite a journey himself over the decades. He has a podcast which has a lot of similar themes to my podcast. And we met over the internet after I saw his podcast, and we corresponded a bit. So I couldn't be more pleased to have Danny kick us off. Danny, could you tell me a little bit first about your podcast and what it is that you do?
Okay, well, I will get into it, but I grew up in very evangelical Christianity, was in it for a long time, left Christianity, but have come back to Jesus. And like you mentioned about a better Jesus, one of my favorite quotes of all time is by Buckminster Fuller. And he said, "You can never change the existing reality by fighting against it." He said, "To change something, make a better model, and the old model will become obsolete." And I came back to a much better Jesus, one without all the doctrine and dogma and all the baggage that you have to go through and accept to follow Jesus. And actually, I was ending up following more Moses and Paul than Jesus. So my channel is Rethinking Jesus on YouTube. And I have a website that's rethinkingjesus.com. And I'm just trying to share this message of, hey, Jesus is enough. And it's really the same message that you're trying to share, Chris.
Yeah, fantastic. Fantastic, Danny. Okay, so I have a whole series of questions. You'll see me looking down here, everyone, making sure I've got this right. Okay, so, and we'll take about 50 minutes or so for this. So, Danny, first one is, what were you initially taught about Jesus in your childhood?
Well, I grew up, I like to say, in the Baptist church of a little farming community in Kansas. And I had wonderful, loving Christian parents. I had a very good upbringing, very safe. I always felt loved. Everyone, in a little farming community, everybody is kind of Christian, and so you just kind of fit in. And so, my best friend, David, and I, we were in Sunday school, daily vacation Bible school, summer church camp, the whole thing. And of course, this was Southern Baptist back in the 1950s and 60s. And so it was very like hellfire and, you got to believe in Jesus or you'll go to hell. Well, when I graduated from high school, I went to California. I backslid and ended up becoming a hippie and, smoking a lot of dope and stuff like that. But the upbringing, and I really understand this so clearly now, how like the Jesuits had the saying, "Give me a child until he's 7 and I'll give you the man." Because if you can take a child and implant doctrines of fear of an angry God and hell and the devil and judgment into that child's mind before the child has the ability to really reason things out, it becomes the child's truth and reality. And even though I left it, because I remember a couple instances, I was sitting around a campfire with some people, and it's like, I'm thinking, that's what hell is, And another time I was in a steam room.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, this is hot. I'd hate to get locked in here, man. If I die tonight, I'm going to hell. And, and that brought me back to Christianity. So I came back and I got saved, born again, got rebaptized just for good measure.
I have a question.
And
I have another probing question because I hate to break your flow, but so as a child, this is interesting. You inculcate them, you imprint on them this idea. You said that if you don't believe in Jesus, you are going to hell. Meaning, what was your exact understanding of hell? And the follow-up question is, what effect did that have on you as a child and an adolescent?
Well, as a child, I believed I was saved. I'd gotten baptized in the Baptist church. I had, accepted Jesus as my Savior, So I thought, I was good until I left and I, started doing drugs.
Right.
But my parents were very Christian, and we lived in a trailer. Okay, this is in Kansas, and thanks to the Wizard of Oz, I was terrified of tornadoes. And so my parents got me a Bible with a zipper around it so that I could sleep with it. So anytime it would storm at night, I would grab my Bible and I would, sleep with it like a teddy bear. It was my comfort. So the Bible to me, obviously I couldn't even read. I was probably 5 years old. But to me, this is God's word and it will protect me, and it held superhero powers. And so that was my upbringing and what I had, I believed this was true. And of course, back then there was no internet. There was no, it was Christianity. This is the way. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. You're going to hell if you don't accept it. So, I didn't know any different. And that's the way with every single religion, Christopher. It's just like you have to believe what they tell you to believe, and you get in it. And I was talking to a friend of mine, and she said, hey, some Mormons are starting to invite me to their church. And I went a couple times and liked it. And I said, well, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but if you get in, it's harder to get out because, you're one of us. And along with accepting any religious belief system as your truth and reality, you're accepting a fear of questioning it.
That's a good point. You made the point about, it really becomes your entire world. So once you enter in, then you are in a sense, in a walled compound, and they control that entire compound. And it seemed like the beliefs that you were given is that God has a place called hell that he can send you if he thinks you deserve it. And number two, we know that one of the tickets to hell is to not accept Jesus as your Savior. Basically, that's what you're being taught. Okay, so interesting. So you talked about adolescence, growing up in Kansas, and maybe hugging that Bible. That's kind of a little fetish against the tornadoes and the storms.
Yeah,
you're moving into. You go out, you do drugs. You're in the steam room. It starts to think. You're by a campfire thinking about the fear of hell. And where did your journey take you after that? I think you said that you went back into fundamentalist Christianity or the Baptist experience.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me a little about what that is like and what were you taught specifically about Jesus?
Okay. Well, I came back to Kansas City and I actually got saved, born again or whatever. And I started going to kind of a mega church at the time. It was more of a charismatic. And so I got in with a group of friends. But what really got me was there's an organization called Kansas City Youth for Christ. And it was hyper fundamentalist, and it was a youth ministry. And I went to, they have a Bible college, and they had a television station and a big auditorium and, a couple summer youth camps.
Wow. Like a mega church.
So, yeah. So I got plugged in there, and of course, everybody there, it's like one hive mind. You all believe, if you don't accept Jesus, you're going to hell. He's the only way, atheists, gays, communists, God, all this. It was, And it was really, I mean, there's no dancing, no drinking. You don't even really go to movies because, if somebody might see you going into the movie theater and think you're going to an R-rated movie when you're going to a G-rated movie. So you don't want to blow your witness. And it was all very legalistic and, we got to be better than everything, like the Pharisees. So I'm thankful, God, that I'm not like this Pharisee, this
Right.
publican, this tax collector, or this prostitute,
This movie going, sinner. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was, hyper fundamentalist. But I got into it, and I mean, there was a lot of energy there. And of course, I had just come and I had my testimony of doing drugs. And this was back, in the 70s. And, it's like I was almost like a rock star around there because everybody, oh my gosh, you're the guy that Jesus saved you from Satan's drugs.
Right.
Can you come to our Youth for Christ camp or, and give your testimony? And so, and I stayed in that for a decade, and it was my whole world. Everybody I knew, everybody I interacted with, it was like this bubble, this collective consciousness or this shared reality. We all believed the same thing. And of course, we all believed the rapture was going to happen too.
Yeah. So I'm curious about, what were your, the most key beliefs you had about Jesus, who he was, and how you should relate to him? What were the...
the key beliefs about Jesus is he's God's only son. He came to earth to die for my sins. He died on the cross. And as long as I accept him, Romans 10:9 and 10, I confess with my mouth that Jesus, was raised from the dead, believe in my heart that God raised him from the dead, and I shall be saved. And that was it. And, Jesus was the only way. I mean, Mormons, Muslims, we thought Catholics were going to hell. You grew up Catholic, so, we thought you guys
That's
were going
right.
to hell.
Now, yeah, we were in trouble. We're toast, literally.
Yeah.
Okay.
We were watching TV one time, and Mother Teresa was on, and my roommate, Jack, one of my roommates said, she might be going to hell if she hadn't accepted Jesus. And we said, yeah, she's probably going to hell because she's that's just, it's so stupid now looking back at what the things that I actually believe. But it gets it's so deeply rooted that, I left like 20 some years ago. So it's 100% erased. It's, it's gone.
Yeah.
But it takes a while.
What was it like to begin to, I want to get back to the question about Jesus. So how did these teachings about Jesus, that he's the only way, he died for your sins, he's the only Son of God, how did that affect your approach to him, or even maybe your prayer life, just talking to God? What kind of feelings did you have? What was it like?
Well, it's kind of like the God of the Old Testament, which, I would read the Old Testament and think, okay, this is the Father that Jesus was praying to. It's all, if you obey, I'll love you. If you don't, boy, you're in trouble. And I kind of, in a way, related to Jesus like that. And I really did love Jesus. I loved going to church. I was there every time those doors opened. I had a wonderful network of friends. We would pray together. But it's like, if I go away, he's going to, so there's safety.
Okay. All right. So that's interesting. So your perception of Jesus was, yes, he wants me, but he's really going to be strict about my relationship with him, and that I better believe he's my Savior. I better do this. I better do that, or else. Right. And you kind of implied that it was more of a Old Testament view of God than what it really is. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when the Catholic Church put the Bible together, really, it was in the late 4th century that they kind of finally put the canon together. They took Jesus' 4 Gospels of him, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and they put it right in kind of as a centerfold. And Jesus, we're told, that was the Old Testament, his Father, and actually, we were taught that was Jesus in the Old Testament, sin and plague and fire, and, all
Hold on.
these
This is
things.
I've never heard this before. You were taught that all of these natural disasters were Jesus or the influence of Jesus on
Well,
mankind?
in the Old Testament, when God sends plagues and he sends famine and, that was actually Jesus in the Old Testament because, God was a Trinity. So it's Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Right.
And they're up there. I'm outside.
Tell me about how you were taught that Jesus was the cause of these natural disasters, plagues, or punishments to mankind.
Well, when you get, the Bible, like if you just take Jesus and, read the Gospels about Jesus, this is the Old Testament. This is, mostly Paul's writing. But if you, of course, Christianity, I was taught, the Old Testament Yahweh, that's the God that Jesus was praying to.
Right.
And Jesus and the Father are one. And Jesus said, I only do what I see my Father do. So in the Old Testament, it was actually Jesus, I was taught, and that's what we believe. He was in the Old Testament doing all this. He was sending plagues and famine and fire from heaven and opening the ground and splitting people, gobbling people up and all of this stuff. And then he shows up, and love one another, turn the other cheek, pray for your enemies. And, that's something that I kind of struggled with because we would go out street witnessing.
That's radically different. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we would go out street witnessing, and I mean, I would have people ask me, well, what about God? I mean, he killed women and children, and and I say, well, yeah, but God can do no wrong. I mean, that's what I was taught. The Bible is God's inerrant word, and God can do no wrong. And so it's like, well, he killed those children, but he knew that his ways are higher than ours. He works in mysterious ways, and
that's a hard thing to defend. So you're going through these experiences, and then there was probably, I'm guessing there's a point when you began to think a little bit differently about Jesus and start your journey to a better Jesus, I would say. What would you say was kind of maybe some of the initial moments or a moment you remember as a point of dissatisfaction or confusion or a desire for the real truth?
Well, like I say, I was with KC Youth for Christ for about a decade. I got married, we had kids. It was in my late 40s that it's kind of like, Christianity, there's got to be more to life than Christianity than this. And so anyway, I ended up leaving Christianity. We got a divorce, which kind of helped because I was able to move away, and because it's hard when you're in one social network and, you've been there for decades.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you're not, and you have to tell everybody, and it's a hard thing to say, hey, I can't believe this stuff anymore. But I knew there had to be something better. So I left, and it's kind of probably synchronistically looking back over my life over the last 20 plus years, because I started meeting like Buddhists and Hindus and, New Age and Taoists and just a lot of different people that I had always been taught, oh, they're evil. They worship demons and, and all this stuff. And I got in there and I thought, man, some of these people, they have more fruit than I ever had. They have a love for God, But when I left Christianity, see, in my mind, Christianity was owned by, or Jesus was owned by Christianity. So, if I'm leaving Christianity, I got to leave Jesus too. So it's like, okay, Jesus, goodbye.
Can you elaborate on that? Jesus is owned by Christianity. What does that mean to you?
What it means to me, if you go to, other than some of the New Thought churches, but I mean any of the mainline Protestant or the Catholic Church or Mormon or Jehovah's Witness or whatever, if I go in and I say, hey, I want to join your church, I don't believe all this stuff about the Trinity. I'm not sure Jesus really died for my sins. I don't believe, can I still join? They would say, no. I mean, the price of admission to be a Catholic or a Protestant or a Baptist is you accept the doctrinal statement of faith that, that the church, whichever one you decide to join, whichever one you accept the doctrinal statement of faith, that becomes your truth. It becomes your identity. It's like at Nicaea when Constantine, they came up with the Nicene Creed. Okay, creed, you know this, it means I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So you have everybody, nobody could read back then. Obviously, nobody had a Bible, but you have this authoritative church, and now then it's backed by the full, power and wealth of the Roman Empire, and everybody is parroting together. I believe in one God, the Father, Jesus Christ. And, and of course, if you believe in the Trinity, then you can't see that Jesus actually was saying, or praying for us, Father, may they be one as we are one. So it's just kind of crazy Christian theology.
So you began to move away from that, right? You started, it sounded, from what you're saying, you started interacting with people from different religious and spiritual backgrounds. Mm-hmm. And from what you said, it sounded like you said fruits. And I'm assuming fruits means good deeds, kindness. Can you tell me more about, because you thought, wow, I'm observing a lot of these fruits in these people. What is a fruit, and where does the fruit come from?
Well, Galatians, I think it's 5, maybe 22 or 4. Paul actually writes, and Paul does write some good things. I'm not a real big fan of Paul because I think he really hijacked, and Jesus gets totally lost under Paul. But he said the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, kindness, goodness, patience, long-suffering, self-control. These are like fruits of the Spirit. The fruits of the flesh are lust and greed and hate and fear and jealousy and bitterness and all of these things. So it's kind of like, you got the higher frequencies that are the kingdom of heaven, the love, joy, peace, those fruits. And then you got the bitterness and judgment and that are the lower vibration emotions and things. So that's what I mean when I say fruits. They just had a lot of love, and they were kind and caring and, sharing. And I was really impressed because I had always been afraid. I mean, there's a fear of, even going into a Hindu temple, when I was a Christian. It's like, man, their demons are going to jump all over me. And, and I mean, there was a literal fear. And now I'll go to a Hindu temple. I go to a Buddhist temple. I've worshipped. I've had ceremonies with shamans in the jungles. I mean, I do, and Jesus said, a tree by its fruit.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And if the fruit is producing love and peace and kindness, I mean, that's the tree. I don't care whether you're a Muslim or a Mormon or atheist. I don't think God cares if we're an atheist. I mean, I'm not. To me, the reality of a creator has always been self-evident.
So it sounds like the fruits, if you see the fruit, it's evidence of a valid spiritual life. That you're responding to an urge to be kind to others, or to, at least lead a balanced, good life. That's evidence of true spirituality. Not necessarily what you believe, although that's important. But I was talking with a friend the other day about this. In fact, yesterday, and she said that she has a son-in-law who is just one of the most spiritual people, loving, kind, considerate people she's ever known, but he wouldn't say that he is particularly religious or spiritual. He would never say that. So that's interesting. But the motivation, the real, what counts is there. So this is interesting. So you've gone through, you saw the fruits in these people, and I'm guessing it got you to thinking about this. What direction did you head with this continual interaction?
Well, it opened my eyes to the fact that we're all humans, and these people that I had in my mind demonized and judged and feared for, all my,
Right.
growing up and most of my life, were really beautiful people and, kind. And I really learned a lot going through all of that. And where I began to come back to Jesus was, I saw a lot of them really, they had such a high regard for Jesus. And actually, I also realized that the Eastern philosophy and, the shaman, all of it that, basically everything except the Abrahamic religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, they say that, we are one with the Creator. And so Eastern religion really blends a lot more with Jesus' teachings, not with the whole Bible, but if you take Jesus and you just let him stand alone without interpreting him.
The words of Jesus.
He blends very well with Eastern and others. But what really kind of opened my eyes to Jesus was Paramahansa Yogananda. And he wrote it's a beautiful, like 1,700 page double, book on every word of Jesus in the Gospels. And I thought, man, here this Hindu sage from India loves Jesus and has so much more fruit and a deeper understanding of him than, I ever heard. And so that kind of started me going back. And over the past, especially 4 years, I've really been kind of, really Jesus has just been drawing me back to him. And it's like now I have such a deeper love for Jesus and a deeper understanding than I ever dreamed of, when I was in Christianity.
Wow. That's really a profound liberation. Just incredible because you go to on one end of the spectrum, the beginning of your journey, you are literally locked in a compound. And if you, and that wall is belief. If you believe this, you got to stay. But if you break out, you're done for. Right. Not only are you going to hell from I'm just kind of trying to remember what you said, but I'm not going to be your friend anymore. You're not going to be part of this family. You're not going to be part of the social network. And especially if you're in a small town, that's the majority of the town, I would suppose. But growing up in a rural community in Kansas.
Well, I had, left and was in Kansas City, had a whole new thing. Whenever I was in like my mid to late 40s when I started really thinking, man, this, there's got to be more to life and more to God than what I'm seeing. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. I really like how your story really showed how your understanding of Jesus changed to where you saw that anyone in any religion or belief system can encounter him. And it seems like most people have a positive impression of him, not of the religion that claims it owns him, but of him. And just full disclosure, I was raised Catholic and I attend a local progressive Christian church, which I enjoy very much. But yeah, I absolutely agree with you. How about what's your current understanding of Jesus, and then what's your experience of Jesus?
Well, how I understand Jesus now, growing up, it was just Jesus is the Son of Yahweh, and Paul came to explain to us what Jesus really did. Okay, and the difference now is back then it was just Jesus just came. He died for my sins. That's it. That's the reason he came. He came because of me. It's my fault. I put him on that cross. I should be ashamed. Right. And that's the way religion does. It keeps, that's my fault. I'm so unworthy. I'm just a worm. That's kind of how I was growing up. But now I see Jesus as coming to set us free from the indoctrination of religion. Because if you look at the Judaism, which was started by Moses, and he set up this whole hierarchical system over these people, like 2 million as the story goes in Exodus, he leads them all out of Egypt. Now they're in the desert, so he sets up this hierarchy, makes his brother the high priest and his family, the Levites, the ones that can work in the temple, and then he gives the law of Moses. And every child growing up, I mean, you think I was indoctrinated. I mean, it's like you teach your children to fear God, and you teach, And so people grow up in this, and when a child is born into, it doesn't matter whether it's Islam or, Mormon, Jehovah Witness, whatever, child doesn't know any different. They just look at the parents, all of these
You trust your parents. You just trust them automatically.
You do.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my parents were loving, good people. My mother, I mean, she was a saint. I love her. And and my father's father, who I never met, he died before, I was born, but his name was Moses. And boy, he looked like Moses too. And he was very strict. And of course, he got it from his parents, who got it from his parents. So, I look at religion today as it's like a system, a belief system set up, and all the components of the, the sacraments and the creeds and the rituals and the traditions and everything that goes into it. And people get into it, and, it's the system. Once it gets started and you have a hierarchy and children are born into it, it really has taken on a life of its own, because it's going to be passed from generation to generation, all down through the centuries, until we see how the system has been used to give us our perception of reality. And once we see that and see how the system works, then we can say, oh, I see you. And it's kind of like Neo in the Matrix. It's like, oh, I see you. And I think that's why Jesus came, was to tell us that we have the power within us. We are one with God. I mean, and he says that so clearly, especially in John chapter 17, that whole thing from John 14 to John 17. And he's saying, if you believe the things that I do, it's not me doing them. It's the Father in me doing the works, and the same works that I do, you can do, and even greater works than these. I mean, Jesus wasn't like, hey, look at me, I'm great. Now only me, only I can do this. No, he was trying to elevate us. And, and like Luke 6:40 says, he was talking to his disciples. The disciple, you're not above the master. I'm the master, you're the disciple. But when you're fully trained, you will become like the master. And so Jesus, I believe, came to tell us that the same consciousness, the Christ consciousness that he fully embodied. And again, Jesus never said, hey, it's me, Jesus, look how great I am. No, I can do nothing of myself. It's the Father in me doing the works, and the Father, the Spirit, is in you too, and you can do the same works. But our doctrinal, this indoctrination, it keeps us from it, because you cannot possibly say I'm one with God, just like Jesus is, when the church has told us that's blasphemy.
Pretty deep teachings that were given. So you have this new understanding of Jesus. What's your experience of Jesus like now?
Now it's like Jesus is, I feel like I'm constantly just, thinking about him. It's like just in thought, I'm trying to, like in my meditations, I'll just sit there and, I love my meditations, and I'll just meditate on Jesus. And a lot of it is, of course, I used to pray, and most Christians, they pray using words, and God do this and God do that. And I just like to sit and I just open my heart, and I just still my mind, and I just sit there and I just listen. And it's almost like I commune kind of almost without words. It's more feeling. And then I, just listen and it's kind of like just being the observer and kind of watching, and it's beautiful, but it's so much more intimate. And it's, Jesus' love is totally unconditional. I mean, you read the Old Testament, man, that God. You don't want to cross him.
That's right.
You read Jesus, the parable of the prodigal son, you can't get more polar opposite than that. And Jesus, when he said, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. If you're looking at me, you're not looking at me, you're looking at the one who sent me. And I
Yeah.
only do what I see my Father do. So if we want to know what the Father,
It's a
mother is
tremendous
like.
revelation. It's absolutely an incredible revelation. He is the way, the truth, and the life. And you and I share that, that experience of him, and I'm sure many people watching this will. What would you say to someone who had a really bad church experience or is just a little skeptical of those negative teachings, and they're thinking like, Jesus, no, that's all nonsense. It's part of church control. It's mamby-pamby. It's delusional. It's whatever people say about that. And if you're watching this podcast, you may feel that way. It's not invalid, but what would you say to someone who's experiencing that? Because you've been through this whole journey of the initial acceptance, the indoctrination, the crystallization of it, and then the cracking of it through the cracking of that ice through the love of these other people. To now you're in a totally different world. But what would you say to someone like that?
Well, I would say to anybody that, you're leaving Christianity, you're struggling with this. I mean, and again, this is what I do. I tell people, take just the Gospels. I mean, this is little. If you're going to read the Bible through in a year, I mean, you got to read 3 or 4 chapters and you make it through in a year. If you do that, even 1 chapter a day, you will have been through the Gospels, I think, 4 times in a year, and you'll have a good understanding of Jesus.
Right.
And stop interpreting Jesus through Paul and through Moses, because I believe that, when they put the Bible together, the Jewish Bible, the Old Testament, was already assembled by the Jews, and the Catholic Church just said, well, we'll take Jesus and put him in here. And then they took Paul, which most of the rest of the New Testament is Paul. And right. Paul is given his interpretation of, well, this is what Jesus did. He came to die for your sin, and there's none righteous, no, not one. So I would tell people, who are struggling with Christianity, Christ and Christianity are 2 entirely different things, and I do believe that Christianity, all religions basically, all organizations,
right.
They're designed to unify the minds of the masses into one unit, one hive mind, one shared reality. And that way a hierarchy can control us. And that doesn't mean that there aren't wonderful things done through organized belief systems or through Christianity or any other, or there aren't good people in it. It's sincere people. But I try to make a distinction between the people and the system itself. So what I tell people is just keep Jesus, but, all the doctrines of Christianity, like, I don't know how I could possibly prove there was a real Adam and Eve, or that's where original sin comes from. So how can I believe something that, I have to believe in a talking snake? So I just let that go. And I look at just the red letters and I see, what did Jesus actually teach? And
Can you explain to people who might not be familiar, when you say the red letters, what do you mean?
Okay. The red letters are, again, the gospel here, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And the red letters, and not all Bibles have it, but almost all of them do, I think. The words that Jesus actually spoke are in red. So if you focus on the red letters, and you'll see that really the things that Jesus said, they're not even religious. They are things like forgive and treat others as you want to be treated, be compassionate, be a peacemaker, be kind. I mean, things that the world really needs, but they're things that any atheist or anybody else can do. They're universal truths to bring the kingdom of heaven here to earth if we would all do them. And Christianity, on the other hand, is not about doing the things that Jesus told us to do, but it's about believing doctrines about Jesus. Mm-hmm. And most of the doctrines of Christianity, they don't come from this little bitty part here in the middle. They come from the Old Testament. They come from the New Testament.
And some of them even introduced in the 20th century.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So
yeah, wow, that's profound. That's a lot. Yeah. That's a lot to be on someone's shoulders to have that filter. Yeah, go ahead, Danny. Yeah,
I was just going to say I've helped people who are leaving Christianity, because I say, you don't have to leave Christianity. You don't have to leave Jesus. Keep Jesus. Just say, and I've asked Christians this too. Why do you need to believe doctrine? And they'll look at me like, huh? What do you mean, why do I have to believe? Well, I have to believe. Well, why? Well, you got to believe to be a Christian. Bingo, that's it. You can't be a Christian or you can't join an organized hive mind without believing what everybody else in the hive mind believes, regardless of which one it is. But you can follow Jesus and his teaching. Forgiveness, that's not religious. That doesn't belong to any church.
What advice would you give someone if they say, okay, I had this negative experience, I'm really confused. How do I approach Jesus without needing to go through an organization or a religion or Christianity?
Well, I say that Jesus, I don't think he came to start a religion. I think he came to totally transform Judaism. Because, it was so deeply indoctrinated into the people. And he basically said, all you have to do, just love the Creator, love your neighbor as yourself. You fulfilled it all. You don't need any of this. But, of course, we got to follow all this. And, I think all of this is kind of a distraction just from, hey, just treat our neighbor as we want to be treated.
It can get very, very complicated. Yeah, and he gave the great commandment. The final great commandment was, you should love and serve others as I have loved and served you. With that parental, unconditional love that you talked about of the, that in the parable of the prodigal son. And if people are unaware of it, the parable of the prodigal son is about a wealthy Jewish landowner, and his son wants his part of the inheritance. Finally gets his father to give it to him, and this son doesn't do much work on that farm at all, if any parties. He leaves, right? He goes to a different country, blows all the money on prostitutes and partying, and now he's starving to death, feeding pigs. And he comes back, and he's welcomed by a father who loves him to the deepest depths possible, and doesn't even criticize him or attack him or make him feel guilty about the foolish choices that he's made.
100%. Yeah.
It's just,
pretty
astounding.
If we just went by the Gospels and following what Jesus actually taught about God, we would have no fear of God. And Christianity says, you got to fear God or you'll be in sin. No, it's actually the love of God that just makes us want to open our heart, surrender to God. And it is so much more of a surrender to me now than ever before. And then synchronicities happen and things. So, I'm just so happy that I finally, found my way out of this organized religion to just follow Jesus.
Yeah, that's exciting, Danny. I appreciate you sharing your story today. It's absolutely fabulous. It's a good way to start out, because you came from a very hard, restricted place to. I think you had the courage to seek the truth, accept the truth. Because I believe that unless you could have changed your thinking, there would be no way out.
No, because when I went to Bible college, I hadn't really read the Bible a whole lot, but I went saying, okay, this is the Word of God, and I'm going to prove it's true. So I went with a preconceived,
Right.
When you're doing that, you can't see contradictions. You can't see things that don't make sense. But, and again, there's a fear of questioning what we've been taught. You don't want to go to your pastor or your priest and, I mean, you might, and, you might say, yeah, it's all bullshit, but probably not. I don't know.
No. I think it takes tremendous bravery to do what you did. Very, very much so.
Well, yeah,
It's
it does, but it's so worth it.
because I think it relates to that parable, or the pearl of great price, right? That Jesus said that you need to be willing to give up everything for that one wonderful jewel. And it's counting the cost, where you have to say, if I really desire the truth, if I value the truth above all else, then I have to be willing to give up, like you said, the community, etc., even your sense of complete security. And that's a huge transition that you've done. And I love the work that you're doing. I just really enjoy the podcast. But Danny, did you want to add any final advice to the discussion before we close out?
Well, yeah, I would just say to anybody, and I'm not saying Jesus is the only way, because I think there are saints in all religions, and I think there are saints who are atheists. That, I think Jesus taught real clearly that it's not about believing doctrine, but it's about doing the things that he said. And I would say read the gospel, just read through them. They're simple to understand. This can be understood. It's not hard to understand. Forgive one another, love one another, treat others as you want to be treated. You get into the rest of it, you probably better go to seminary and try to piece it all together. But, I think you'll really fall in love with Jesus if you see him without all the doctrinal baggage that's been attached to him. So, yeah, he's always there for you. I mean, like the prodigal son, when he started back toward home and he said, I'm going to go to my father and just beg him to make me a servant. And the father saw him when he was a long way off, and he ran to him and threw his arms around him, didn't even let him give his repentance speech. Father, I blew it. He said, bring the finest, robe, kill the fatted calf. And that's the love of Jesus, and he's always there. So you don't have to be 100%, okay, I'm all good now. Now I can go to Jesus. Go to him broken, go to him addicted, go to him,
this is an internal this is an internal experience you can have at any time, based on what you've told me.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
It absolutely is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, and check other, you can get a lot from like other traditions too. So, just look for, is it about love? Is it making me more loving? Is it making me a better person, more at peace? I would focus. In fact, I tell people I kind of just basically take Jesus out of the Bible and let him stand totally alone. I still read stuff in the rest of the Bible and refer to it, but Jesus, he's so far above as far as authoritative, and, anything that Jesus said is over, more authoritative than anything Paul said or Moses or anybody else.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so there are several letters from Paul, or some teachings from Paul. They don't even know if Paul wrote them. There's a lot of that too. So, but yeah, if you're having an internal experience of Jesus, or being drawn to it, that he is a divine being and can connect with you, period. That I think that's your message. I want to thank you so much, Danny, and
thank you, Chris.
It's been a great pleasure. And also, so for everybody who's watching, if you're looking for more content like this, you can go to findmynewlife.com, and there are links to all kinds of things. And also, this is, again, the first in this series of My Journey to a Better Jesus, and we'll be having other guests on. I wish everybody the very best, and remember, you are a child of God, and we are family. Thanks for listening today. I hope it helped you on your journey. Go to findmynewlife.com for all my podcasts and much more. If you'd like to contact me with ideas or requests, use the Contact Me link on that website. I wish you the best on your spiritual journey. Remember, you are a child of God and we are family. You could claim an amazing destiny. See you next time.